Letter 44 by Charles Lamb. Charles Lamb to Robert Southey, March 15, 1799. Dear Southey, I have received your little volume, for which I thank you, though I do not entirely approve of this sort of intercourse, where the presents are all one side. I have read the last eclogue again with great pleasure. It hath gained considerably by abridgment, and now I think it wants nothing but enlargement. You will call this one of tyrant Procrustes' criticisms, to cut and pull so to his own standard. But the old lady is so great a favorite with me, I want to hear more of her, and of Joanna you have given us still less. But the picture of the rustics leaning over the bridge, and the old lady traveling abroad on a summer evening to see her garden watered, are images so new and true that I decidedly prefer this ruined cottage to any poem in the book. Indeed, I think it the only one that will bear comparison with your Hymn to the Penates in a former volume. I compare dissimilar things, as one would a rose and a star for the pleasure they give us, or as a child soon learns to choose between a cake and a rattle, for dissimilars have mostly some points of comparison. The next best poem, I think, is the first eclogue, "'Tis very complete, and abounding in little pictures and realities. The remainder eclogues, excepting only the funeral, I do not greatly admire. I miss one, which had at least as good a title to publication as The Witch. Or The Sailor's Mother. You called it the last of the family. The Old Woman of Berkeley comes next. In some humors I would give it the preference above any. But who the devil is Matthew of Westminster? You are as familiar with these antiquated monastics as Swedenborg, or, as his followers affect to call him, the Baron, with his invisibles. But you have raised a very comic effect out of the true narrative of Matthew of Westminster. 'Tis surprising with how little addition you have been able to convert with so little alteration his incidents, meant for terror, into circumstances, and food for the spleen. The parody is not so successful. It has one famous line indeed, which conveys the finest deathbed image I ever met with. The doctor whispered the nurse, and the surgeon knew what he said. But the offering the bride 3 times bears not the slightest analogy or proportion to the fiendish noises 3 times heard. In Jasper, the circumstance of the great light is very affecting, but I had heard you mention it before. The rose is the only insipid piece in the volume. It hath neither thorns nor sweetness, and besides, sets all chronology and probability at defiance. Cousin Margaret, you know I like. The allusions to the Pilgrim's Progress are particularly happy, and harmonize tacitly and delicately with old cousins and aunts. To familiar faces we do associate familiar scenes and accustomed objects, but what hath Apollyon and his sea-nymphs to do in these affairs? Apollyon I could have borne, though he stands for the devil, but who is Apollyon? I think you are too apt to conclude faintly, with some cold moral, as in the end of the poem called The Victory. Be thou her comforter, who art the widow's friend. A single commonplace line of comfort, which bears no proportion in weight or number to the many lines which describe suffering. This is to convert religion into mediocre feelings, which should burn and glow and tremble. A moral should be wrought into the body and soul, the matter and tendency of a poem, not tagged to the end, like a god send the good ship into harbor, at the conclusion of our bills of lading. The finishing of the sailor is also imperfect. Any dissenting minister may say and do as much. These remarks, I know, are crude and unwrought, but I do not lay claim to much accurate thinking. I never judge system-wise of things, but fasten upon particulars. After all, there is a great deal in the book that I must, for time, leave unmentioned, to deserve my thanks for its own sake, as well as for the friendly remembrances implied in the gift. I again return you my thanks. Pray present my love to Edith, C.L. Southey's little volume was Vol. Roman II, of the second edition of his poems, published in 1799. The last of the English eclogues included in it was The Ruined Cottage, slightly altered from the version referred to in Letter 38. The Hymn to the Penates brought the first volume of this edition to a close. The first eclogue was The Old Mansion House. The Old Woman of Berkeley was called a ballad showing how an old woman rode double and who rode before her. It was preceded by a long quotation in Latin from Matthew of Westminster. Matthew of Westminster is the imaginary name given to the unknown authors of a chronicle called Flair's Historiarum, belonging probably to the 15th century. The parody was The Surgeon's Warning, which begins with the 2 lines that Lamb prints as one. The doctor whispered to the nurse, and the surgeon knew what he said. The rose was blank verse, addressed to Edith Southey. Cousin Margaret was a metrical letter written from London in which there are allusions to Bunyan. The reference to a paladin is explained by these lines. The sylphs should waft us to some goodly isle, like that where whilome old a paladin built up his blameless spell.